Commodore 64 games. You can play stuff like Bomb Jack. I remember the time me and Hannibal needed to disarm some bombs. Some crazy fools left over in Vietnam. Listen up, kids. War, it's a loss. It rots your soul. Now get on my face.
I remember the halcyon days of the ZX Spectrum. If you got anything wrong with your homework, you could take the keyboard and rub it all out yourself, because it had small rubber keys. It was fantastic. And the games were superb. Bomb Jack, of course, being my particular favourite. What a conversion of an arcade machine. Danger Mouse wasn't fantastic, but was the first game that had multi-level play. It had tons and tons of playability, if you like, but it looked a bit pants. And then there was Bruce Lee, the first ever license of a dead bloke. You had to run around, collect lanterns, run to another section, and it basically was the forerunner for any other type of platform game you'll ever see in your life. Of course, it wasn't as good as Jet Set Willy, but Mario, take note. The Commodore 64 was a monumental occasion because this time we got colours on screen rather than just blocks of orange. And BMX Simulator was the Darling brothers' first ever attempt. They run Codemasters, you know. Got a mansion out in the country. They're rich now. All because of this game. Ghosts and Goblins was the best arcade conversion on the Commodore 64. Unfortunately, the emulators don't quite match the speed that it had at the time, but it was absolutely brimming with gameplay. And then there was the forerunners to Street Fighter and the like. International Karate was superb. Quite a bit better than Way of the Exploding Fist. Street Fighter, take note.
That was good stuff, but you listen up here, kids. Some of that stuff is illegal. You don't get in trouble with the police. You listen to T. Okay, it's time for the reviews on the T-Show. Being the T-Show, I got the best retro games of the moment, you hear? First of all, we got Jet Set Willy on the Spectrum. That was brilliant. I remember Face Off. We used to play that game all the time. In the back of the van playing Willy. You can see him through the door. Next up, we have Impossible Mission on the Commodore 64. That was a brilliant game. I remember the time me and Hannibal, we went on an impossible mission to free the Mexican peasants from those horrible property developers. They said it's impossible. We got those crazy fools to hit the road. Get out of my face.
Let me tell you a little story. Mario wasn't the first ever platformer that wowed kids everywhere. No, that was Jet Set Willy, or Manic Miner as he was in the first game. Now, Jet Set Willy was the sequel to the classic Manic Miner, and it really brought a brand new era to video gaming. For starters, it had multiple rooms that you could wander to and from. There were absolutely tons of items collected, and it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. You didn't have to just collect a couple of bits and bobs. You had to go around this entire mansion and collect everything. It was programmed by a bloke called Matthew Smith, who's kind of disappeared now, but he was a genius of his time. Now, if you consider that the Spectrum only had 48K of memory, and your average Pentium has over 1.5 gig with a 16 megabyte RAM pack, you know exactly where I'm coming from. This had over 100 levels. I've got 3 words for you. Jet Set Willy. What a game. I have prayed to the gods to be able to review this game because it came out in 1983. Get that, 1983. That is 14 years ago. And it still rates as one of the best platform games of all time. It was on a machine that really couldn't handle the sort of expansion of levels and codes, and it was so good that I feel a little tear.
Rick, why are we dressed up as George Clinton today?
I don't know.
But Rick is right, this is an absolutely fabulous game. At the time, it was the biggest game ever released. And it looks incredibly basic now, obviously, but it's still great. The only problem with, when I completed it back in the old days, was that the end sequence is useless. It just sends you right back to the beginning, and you have to do it all again. So other than that, it's absolutely wonderful.
For what Jet Set Willy did for the Spectrum, Impossible Mission did in spades for the Commodore 64. Now, unfortunately, the emulator version doesn't run at quite the speed you'd expect on the Commodore 64, but it's still a classic game. You had to run around huge platform levels and access computer terminals, gaining puzzle pieces to allow you to eventually overthrow the evil Dr. X. Oh, he was nasty. In fact, it was the first ever game with speech in it, because it actually started with the immortal phrase, "Stay a while, stay forever," ha ha, etc. Fade to end. Now, in those days, we didn't have any such thing as motion capture. So the only reason why the character runs so smoothly, jumps so smoothly, is because it was accurate sprite animation. Of course, the company, Epyx Games, went on to do Summer Games, California Games, and tons of those sort of track and fieldy style products, and they were brilliantly animated too. I wonder whatever happened to them.
Impossible Mission, like Jet Set Willy, is another genre-defining game. Basically, this is the first action-packed platform experience, and it was, for the time, very fast, very frenetic, lots of wobbling about in lifts, shooting people, avoiding evil robots, and solving puzzles on huge video screens in the wall. I'm more familiar with the Spectrum version, but of course the Commodore 64 version had better graphics and a cool soundtrack, and was probably better. And it was wonderful, and I'm crying. Rick.
This game made history as being the most in-depth experience you'll ever play. It was very simple. You were a little spy type and you had to go around accessing computer terminals and using platforms to get to different computer terminals just to solve puzzles. But the very simple basis of it is there were hundreds of levels, it all moved fantastically, and it was a forerunner to games like Prince of Persia because the actual character on screen moved very realistically. It was so good that it defied belief. And as a Commodore 64 game, you just have to take one step back and glare at it in amazement. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant, and I'm surprised they haven't updated it, to be completely honest with you. And if you don't go and download this and an emulator, you're a done fool. You're a done fool.
Remember, kids, there ain't no mission that's impossible. You gotta put your mind to it. You hear what I'm saying? Hey, what's this? Two impersonators sent by the government to kill me. I told you, I'm innocent. I didn't commit the crime. Just get out of my face, you crazy fools. Stop trying to emulate the T. Okay, talking about emulators. If you ain't got a Spectrum or a Commodore 64, all you need is a PC. Then you can download one of these emulators from the internet, and you can learn what you want. Here's how.
The web is a cornucopia of retro gaming. You can download emulators and games from millions of different sites. The ZX Spectrum Software Museum gives you absolutely tons of Spectrum games and the emulator itself. Then of course there's the Jet Set Willy fan club, which will give you all the Jet Set Willys and brand new versions of the game that people have done. But if you want Commodore 64, go to Yahoo and type in Commodore 64. You'll be surprised at how many websites cover that one. Look, there's Tony Crowther. He did Realms of the Haunting, you know. Then all you have to do is download them. There are tons of emulators. You can even get BBC B and Commodore 64, but you'd be mad.
Just remember, ain't nobody gonna emulate the T. That's why I should bring the A-Team back. Ain't no show that's as good as the A-Team. Okay, it's time to go over to the Tips Bouncer. Except I didn't like the Tips Bouncer, so I got rid of him. It's time for the T-Bouncer. Excuse me, fool. I'm afraid if you can't do this, you just ain't getting in.
Hardcore 4x4, fool.
Hardcore 4x4.
That's a little bit better.
Right, during the time trial name entry, enter your name as Dutchman. Once that's entered correctly, a strange little face will appear in the right-hand corner of the screen. Exit out, and then go into the credits, and you'll be rewarded with a whole new game of Roids. But instead of asteroids, you'll be shooting at the programming spaces instead.